Alright, this is going to be my Creed 3 spoiler review. So if you don't want spoilers, you don't want to know what happens to the movie, don't watch the rest of the video because I'm going to get into heavy spoiler territory. I'm going to cover basically everything that happens in the movie. So I actually got to see it early. I saw it on IMAX, which was pretty cool. The movie looked amazing. You know, visually it looked great. They try to do some different things. I'm going to get into the fighting scenes and stuff like that. Unfortunately, Sylvester Stallone did not come back for this movie. I'm going to get into what happened with that. I'm not going to get into the whole story, but I'm going to touch on it at the end and why it's an issue and some other notes about Stallone. I'm going to be jumping around a little bit in this review. I don't remember exactly like what scenes were where. The movie starts off, Creed is the champion. He's fighting over in Africa. He's actually fighting the guy that he fought in part 1, played by Tony Bellew. Fighting him, right away you notice how the fight is shot differently. Like there's, you know, kind of like slow down special effects. You see the sweat and everything. I didn't really care for that, honestly. Like I understood they've had so many of these movies and so many boxing movies. You want to do something different visually. And I know Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut, he wanted to do something different. I mean, the special effects look good, just not for me personally. He ends up winning. You know, he ends up beating him. Because remember in the first one he actually lost, but he went the distance. You know, so that, I mean, that was kind of cool. Then they flash back to his childhood. Throughout the movie, there's flashbacks of what happened with him and his friend Damien. But I'm just going to tell you exactly what happened without, because again, it goes through the movie. They're short little flashbacks. So basically, Damien and him were best friends. They grew up in a group home together. But even after he got out of the group home, he used to still hang out with him. Snuck out of his house to go to Damien's boxing matches and stuff like that. Damien gets a knockout, uses the overhand right, which later comes into play in the movie. So they go out celebrating after Damien wins his fight, and they go to a store, and Damien's waiting in the car. But prior to that, Adonis had already seen that Damien had a gun in his duffel bag with all the rest of his stuff. Adonis goes into the store, but right before he actually goes into the store, he sees a guy that you don't know the backstory on him, but he's like, remember me? I was smaller then, and he starts attacking and beating him up. What ends up happening is, they show this later on because they showed it in clips. He gets the best of this guy, but the guy's friends jump on him. Damien comes out of the car. Damien pulls a gun on them, you know, to help his friend protecting him. The cops show up, but then Adonis just takes off. So that's how his friend Damien ended up going to jail, because he was protecting him, and Adonis just fled the scene, which, you know, is understandable. He's a kid, doesn't know what to do. But then that's why that's why Damien was locked up for so many years, and that's why he's bitter towards him. But you don't know that right away. Again, this is shown throughout the movie. So Adonis wins the title. He's the unified champion. He ends up retiring. He's living a good life with his family. His daughter doesn't, you know, loses her hearing at some point, or maybe she was already. I remember they showed when she was born that she had a hearing problem, but she's deaf, so he has to sign with her. You know, there was a good family element to it. He's still with Bianca, obviously. What ends up happening is he's training other fighters. He's got fighters under his wing. This guy named Chavez, played by I believe it was Benavidez Jr. My only problem with him was that the guy fights at 154. I mean, I'm sure he walks around at 170, 175, but you can see he's really he's tall and lanky. He doesn't look like a heavyweight, so I don't understand why they picked him. But he's actually on his way to fighting Drago's son. He's going to defend it against Drago. So Damien actually gets out of prison, and we've probably seen this scene in the trailer where he's like, oh, you don't remember me? He's sitting on his car, or leaning against his car, I should say. And then he eventually recognizes him. That's another thing about this. They took out a lot of scenes from the trailer they took out a lot of scenes that were in the trailer, and they didn't make it their way to the movie. I don't know if they shot some of these scenes specifically for the trailer. I know there was also some reshoots, so it's possible that during the reshoots and everything, because I know there were problems with this movie during production, that they took these scenes out. So there's stuff that's missing. So he ends up, you know, he has, he catching up with Dame. He has dinner with him and everything. They're catching up on what happened, you know, him going to jail. Obviously needs help, you know, he's very prideful. He refuses the money that Adonis was going to give him, but he offers to bring him to the gym and, you know, let him spar at least. But he's got higher ambitions than that, you know, because he was a great amateur. They explained how he was a great amateur. He was a prospect. He was on his way, but unfortunately he went to prison. So he says that he never got the letters that Damien had sent them while he was in prison. But eventually it's revealed later on that his mother, played by Phylicia Rashad, who did a tremendous job. She was great in the series. She hid the letters from him, basically trying to protect him. But at the same time, that was kind of a scumbag move. She should have shown him the letters, because that's part of the reason why Damien ends up becoming so bitter against him and feels like he left him for dead. Initially he's just sparring. He's sparring that kid Chavez. His friend gets a little frustrated because he wants to get a title shot. He doesn't want to be like just a sparring partner or anything like that. They're talking about how he's older now and, he hasn't fought in years. So, his frustration is growing with him. But Adonis is trying to help him out. He introduces him to his family and everything like that. So what ends up happening eventually is that they go to like this party and Drago was there. Drago's son, obviously, played by the same guy, Florian. I forget his last name. He's in this too. He reprises his role. They're at a party and he's supposed to fight Chavez. So somebody attacks him and ends up injuring his hand. So then Chavez doesn't have an opponent now. So you find out later on that basically Damien hired somebody that he was in prison with to injure Drago. That way he can get the title shot, because otherwise he wasn't getting a title shot. He tried to get Adonis to give him a title shot, and Adonis is like, it doesn't work that way. It's not that easy. He's like, well, it worked that way for you. I know it's a movie and everything, but I just felt like, why didn't he tell him, like, listen, I'm going to get you on a bunch of undercards, or we're going to try to build you up, we'll see where this goes. He doesn't do any of that. He's basically like, it takes time, whatever. I mean, again, maybe I'm just nitpicking, it's just a movie. So he ends up maneuvering himself into that title shot. Creed gets him to get the title shot versus Chavez, which is also his fighter, So the long story short of it, he ends up fighting him, uses dirty tactics, wins the fight, and then Adonis is all upset, like, how could you do that the way he was fighting? He doesn't say it, but it's, that's what you get looking at it. Duke's son, Duke Jr., is in the movie too, reprising his role. And he's telling, he tried to warn him not to train this guy, and this guy's not a good person or whatever. Chavez ends up getting, he's in the hospital, he's all beat up and everything. And Creed is all upset. And, it's watching the movie again, it's a movie, I understand dramatic reasons, but it's like, what is he upset about? This is the boxing game, this is the Hurt Business, like, his friend just won the title. He should be happy for him. I know that the other guy was his fighter too, and it was a prospect. Not a prospect. He was a superstar, but it kind of is what it is. I don't know. He was all upset at him for hurting him, fighting dirty. I understand why they did things, for dramatic purposes, but I don't know. I just didn't really buy that part. So the kid ends up going to the hospital. Chavez ends up going to the hospital. Then his mother called, and then he finds out that she shows him the pictures of prison or whatever, and like he was with this guy. She shows him the letters that he wrote, right? And he's like, "Why didn't you tell me this? You should have told me this. Damien was my brother." They get into a little bit of an argument, but then she basically reveals to him that one of the guys in the pictures, that he was, one of the guys, the guy that attacked Drago's son, I should say, and injured him. So basically, he manipulated the whole situation. So he ends up going to the fight after party for Damien. And they exchange words and everything, and it's really negative. And Damien punches him, knocks him down, and Creed ends up walking away. He's got a black eye. And he ends up speaking to his wife about the situation. And this is another thing I didn't understand. The whole big secret, they mentioned this guy that was in the group home with them. I guess he worked for the group home. He was an older guy. I kind of thought that maybe he was molested, and that's why he was hiding it. That was the guy that he attacked in the beginning of the movie, when they showed that he attacked somebody on the street that he recognized. It was that guy. And the big reveal is that this was an older guy, I guess, in charge of them. Maybe he worked there, and he used to beat them up. But it wasn't any thank God there was no sexual abuse. But that's what I kind of assumed. So I didn't understand why that was a big like secret, that he used to get beat up by this guy and he was hiding it and he couldn't confront that. And it tied into why Damien ended up going to prison. It showed that Damien did have his back, but at the same time, Damien felt like he turned his back on him, which he kind of did, because he never wrote him, never showed up to prison. He said it was because he was guilty and he wanted to forget about what happened, but also the mother hid the stuff from him. At this point, he's actually, he's retired for 3 years, hasn't fought. Damien's calling him out. He ends up deciding to fight again. They had the training montages. The training montages, they weren't that great, to be honest with you. The music wasn't that good. They were okay. I never got that. It was missing the spirit of Rocky. It was missing a lot. This movie really, really suffers. I mean, it's not a bad movie. The movie suffers without Stallone, without his magic, without him being there. It's just not quite the same. They end up fighting, and they did something different visually, with the fighting, where they wouldn't, at some points they wouldn't even show the crowd. Like, I understand Michael B. Jordan said he had some anime influence. I didn't care for it. Like, you don't see the crowd, and it's just them in the ring, and they kind of black out the crowd, and then they show like a steel cage, like prison, like they were, as if like the ring was surrounded by the prison and other stuff. I mean, visually it looks kind of cool, but it's special effects, and with the extreme close-ups and the sweat, I didn't really care for it. Maybe I'm too much of a traditionalist. I'm used to the way the series is shot. I don't know. thought it was okay. I mean, if you want a special effects movie, I mean, that's cool, but it's not what I was looking for. The fight was okay, you know, it wasn't anything special. I thought the movie suffers without Rocky in his corner with Duke Jr. in there. You know, he's talking to Creed, he's trying to motivate him, but it's not the same. It's just that magic is not there at all. Obviously, Creed ends up winning the fight. He used the same overhand right that Damien used earlier in the movie when he was first coming up. I mean, that was okay. And, you know, then at the end of the fight, you know, they end up going to the locker room. They speak with each other. They kind of, he explain, you know, Creed apologizes to him, and Damien says, it wasn't your fault. We were kids. And, you know, they make up. That was kind of cool, you know, because throughout the movie, you kind of feel bad. At the beginning of the movie, you do feel bad for Damien, right? For what he went through and everything. But then he does that harsh turn where he's just a piece of garbage. And you kind of got the feeling that he was just using him the whole time. He was using Adonis. He was never really his friend. But then at the end, you find out that he was his friend. So I didn't think they did a good job like that. You kind of set up, you felt bad for him. But then he just becomes just a straight up villain. And then you feel kind of bad for him again. So I didn't think, I thought that was poorly done. At the very end of the movie, he goes back to the ring and kind of training his daughter. There was a scene earlier where he was trying to train his daughter. You know, it was cute stuff, family stuff, you know, because his daughter had gotten picked on in school, punched the kid in the face. Decides to kind of teach her boxing to learn discipline and everything like that. So there were a lot of problems with the production of this movie. You know, I know that initially Stallone was planning on coming back, but because of the rights issues, you know, he was trying to secure some ownership over the character Rocky. Unfortunately, he had signed it away when he was very young to Irwin Winkler, and he was never able to get a piece back. He was trying back and forth, and it's a sad story because he can't make any more Rocky movies or spin-offs or prequels or anything like that because Irwin Winkler actually has the rights. So he's got to say yes or no. So it's an unfortunate situation. He decided to eventually just walk away from, you know, the series, and so the movie suffers. It doesn't have Rocky's heart. It doesn't have Stallone's heart. You know, it kind of feels like just an action boxing movie. It doesn't feel like a Rocky movie. And I understand it's not Rocky, it's Creed, but it's a spin-off and it's in the same universe. The movie's not terrible. If you look at it as just like an action boxing movie, I think it's decent. It's worth the watch. It's entertaining, you know, but it's definitely missing something. And I think of the Creed movies, this is probably the worst one. It's just missing something. Like the score of the movie wasn't really good, you know, and the music, it didn't work. It didn't have, you know, Bill Conti, you're not going to replace Vince DiCola. I forget the other guy that did the last two, the Creed movies, but I thought it was fine. He did a decent job. Score in here is just weak. It's just, the movie suffers. No Stallone. The score is weak. The story I kind of felt was a little convoluted to a degree. I don't know, man. Like it was just, it's an entertaining movie. You know, it's not a bad movie, you know, but you know, it just kind of fell short. You know, the performances were great. You know, the acting was very good. Everybody's good. Tessa Thompson, Michael B. Jordan, Jonathan Majors did a great job. I mean, and the characters were pretty decent. I mean, Adonis was a lot more likable in this movie. I felt like in the first two movies, he was kind of like a whiny guy. He was kind of like unlikable, but in this movie, he was actually very likable. So, well, you guys let me know what you think. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you soon.